right, we are starting a little late, but I'm calling us to order at 6:06. You can call the roll. Oh, no, you're doing paperwork.
Oh, no, I can
I'm
do that.
sorry.
So, no. Okay, so we're at roll call, I apologize.
Yes.
Mr. Manning? Here. Mrs. Gaskins?
Here.
Mrs. Ward?
Yes.
Dr. Kraus?
Here.
And Mr. Timmons is absent,
So I'm driving the tractor.
at least for now.
I passed a hay.
I passed them on one road.
Yes,
Yeah.
Slow me
exactly.
down.
I was probably right by all of you too.
All right, finances first, but I don't really care what order we take this in, so who wants to go first?
We're going to allow finance to go first,
Okay.
thank you.
Well, so what I prepared for you this evening, which is in the blue folders that you have, and you'll notice that there's a lot of color coordination, and the reason that a lot of that is done is so that, at least I found in my experience, when you do them all in, just black and white, and then folks are looking at a variety of different things, they're not sure which one they're looking at. So which one are you talking about? Which one was that again? So now when I refer to them as the one that's on the goldenrod, the one that's on the lime green, we're all on the same page. So what I wanted to do for you this evening is just to give you a little overview and then talk to you a bit about what our next steps would be. As you know, the 5-year forecast was approved in September. The purpose of this update that I'm giving you tonight is really just to get us started on dialogue regarding the current financial condition and to seek input regarding a plan for recovery as required by Board Policy 6510. You know that we have revised 6510 in the month of August to remove the word must, which referred to seeking a ballot issue, to may. And so with that in mind, wanted to touch base again with you about what that 5-year forecast that you approved in September showed us. So if I can, that 5-year forecast reflected a declining ending cash balance in each of the forecasted years, which we anticipated. Based on that 5-year forecast, the estimated ending cash balance in June of 23, is just over $4.9 million, and then just under $1 million in fiscal year 24. It is for this reason that in order to avoid significant program reductions beginning in school year 23-24, the Board of Education and Administration need to develop a plan for recovery, again as required by Board Policy 6210, within 90 days of the time that that 5-year forecast was presented. So that 5-year forecast was presented in September of 20. So by Christmas, roughly, we should have a plan for how we are going to alter the course of the current 5-year forecast. That can be done in 2 ways: seeking additional funds or reductions of program. Basically, those are the only 2 options that we have, or a combination of. There's an infinite number of financial what-if scenarios which can be presented. As you well know, we can what-if this forever. However, in an effort to refine the infinite number of scenarios, it would be most beneficial to answer a few basic questions. By obtaining direction and understanding the ramifications, a much more realistic what-if scenario can be prepared to address the needs of the district moving forward. For example, we would not need to develop a what-if scenario to include a levy in November of 22 if the overwhelming thought is not to be on the ballot in November of 22, but to delay until 23. So instead of talking about all those changes related to 22, if that's not the direction we want to go, let's not, I don't want to use the word waste the time, but you don't want to waste the time developing a forecast for a situation that we're not going to pursue. We also need to decide if we are going to be on the ballot in November of 22, and if we are, what type of levy are we talking about? Are we talking about strictly an operating levy? Are we talking about a combination levy again? And if we are talking about a combination levy or a regular operating levy, what millage are we talking about? And so to get that information nailed down to some degree will allow to build far more scenarios than what I have presented to you today. Just giving you 5 or 6, and I'm not going to go through them all, but I'll just hit on one of them so you see what you're looking at. I really am providing it for you to review at your leisure, and then my recommendation would be that we get together again at another work session in probably November to get those questions answered. When do we want to seek a levy? Do we want to put in reductions? What kind of reductions are we talking about? If the levy is successful, are those things coming back? Those kinds of questions all need to get answered and addressed in order to create a realistic 5-year forecast for us to follow. So what I'll do for you real quick, like I said, is I don't want to spend a whole lot of time doing this with you tonight, because we can pick this thing apart. I had created a matrix, which is in your folder. It was what's to the left. That's just kind of saw it as almost like a menu. What I did for you is that the 0 points that are included in your packet on the right suggest, for example, the one that's goldenrod colored. If there was a levy on the ballot in November of '22 and it passed, and if the cost of living adjustments were this, and if the benefit increases were as you're seeing it, it walks you through cash balances and then the next time when we would be required to be on the ballot. So the design of this matrix is to afford you, instead of having to read through all of this, which you can, but if you want a quick snapshot of what they all mean and what they look like, you can go to this matrix and you'll be able to see exactly what assumptions were used, and there's only a few assumptions, to create that particular 5-year forecast and those cash balances that you see down below. And I bolded those cash balances that would fall just below the 45 days of expenditures, which then would trigger, that's the time that we would probably need to be talking about being on the ballot again. And then I gave you, I just used November instead of May's, but I gave you the November. So you'll notice in the goldenrod, November of '25. So that's what all that stuff does. Yes, ma'am?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you can.
So on this, is this the assumption that the rollover will occur when we're figuring these numbers?
So what you have is the very first 0 point that you have, which is on black and white paper, is the current one that was approved at the September 23rd meeting. The little notation that I have on that, which is this little cover sheet, mentions the fact that it does not include a cost of living adjustment beyond '22, but that a revised 5-year forecast would be expected in November to reflect any changes related to a potential successor agreement.
So this does not reflect that then?
None of that does.
It just takes the current through the 22, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But if you look at the goldenrod,
Uh-huh.
the assumption, I just made a generic assumption that cost of living adjustments would occur every year thereafter into '29. Doesn't mean that it would, doesn't mean that that's what the board agrees to, but that number is how those ending balances came to be. So it just gives you an idea, if you looked at it and said, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we would do, but that you see the figures.
Question on program reductions.
Yes.
You have in parentheses 1,600, but it's listed as a reduction, so does that mean addition? Is that like a double negative?
No, the program reduction would be to reduce expenditures by 1.6 million.
Okay, so if it's in red, that is an actual reduction.
Correct.
But the black is an addition
To bring it back.
to bring it back. Okay,
Correct.
Got
Can
it.
I expound on that question?
Yeah, sure.
So that was one of my questions. What do you mean by program reductions? Because I don't know, that's like a buzz language in the finance world. And because when I hear that, I'm like, oh, does it mean cutting programs? Or could that mean saving where, like on, like resurfacing lots too, or stuff like that? Or is it really as
No,
physical programs?
This would be, the program reductions that I'm referring to here, because again, remember, 80% of our expenditures are in personnel. So in order to reduce $1.6 million, we're basically looking at personnel. And you can either say that's staff reductions, you can call it program reductions, because, and again, just making all this stuff up, so please don't run and take it anywhere. But if a decision was made to reduce foreign language offerings, that's a program reduction, but it could also become we would not need potentially X number of foreign language teachers. If we cut that program back and we had 5 foreign language teachers and we reduced it to, we may not keep a particular foreign language, and so you reduce employees by 2. It's a program reduction because you're reducing the foreign language, but you're also reducing staff, which is what's going to get you to $1.6 million. We could say, we're going to buy a lot less paper next year, but we don't spend anywhere near $1.6 million in paper. So if we stop buying as many cases as we buy, what are we going to save? $1,000, $2,000? The thing that's going to generate reductions is going to be staff.
Let me ask this, so when you talk about program reductions too, I was looking at your, your fourth end quarter report and all that, and looking at, your expenditures versus revenue for the quarter.
Mhm.
And sometimes that has to balance out because some of the revenue may come in an earlier quarter or whatever. So then you look at, so then you look at the end product for the full
Correct.
year. So,
Mhm.
you've got to balance it out. I was looking
Yes.
at that. And I know you made a comment on there about the expenditures exceeding the revenue. The
Yes.
question is, if we have a budget, can't we hope though with some of this as another alternative to spend within our budget, don't have expenditures over our revenues?
Sure.
And keep it
Yes.
contained? Why are we spending beyond what our revenues are bringing in? And how do we contain that? And can't we now start doing that to
Mhm.
save money and to always save so that we have the extra money to roll over so you don't have to go so soon for
Yes.
levies or whatever?
Yes.
To try to save money. It's like living within your means. Does that
Yes.
make sense?
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
you have a budget at home, why are you spending more than you're
Correct.
bringing in?
And in an ideal situation, your revenue would always exceed your expenses. The difficulty in schools and how we're funded is our revenue remains relatively flat, meaning it does not rise,
Right.
and your expenditures typically do.
But can you prioritize them, or, I don't know.
You can, and if you look at any one of these 0 points, like I said,
Mhm.
the largest expenditure source is salaries.
Salaries.
Second is benefits, third is contract services. In order to get your spending in a non-deficit situation, meaning revenue exceeding expenditures,
Mhm.
the only way to do that is to cut back on your expenditures. If 80 cents of all expenditures are in personnel, then you've got to reduce personnel. That's the only way to keep that in line.
Right, so to give you a perspective of what you're asking for, NASA, it's the gray 0 point with 2 failed levies.
Uh-huh.
So in fiscal year 23-24, we cut
Which one are you
$1.6
looking
million.
at?
The gray.
Just
Right.
the
The
one that's
gray,
labeled
but it's
gray.
easiest, I like looking
Yeah,
at the
follow
Yeah,
that.
that's why I was asking which
Mhm.
paper.
So imagine it doesn't say failed levy, imagine it says no levy, no levy.
Mhm.
So in 23-24, we're cutting 1.6 million, and in 24-25, we're cutting 2.2 million. And we still need a levy in 2024, or we're gonna go into fiscal, whatever they call it, when somebody comes and takes us over. So,
Distress.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you wanna live within your means, that's what you're gonna cut the district by.
Yeah, one of the,
By those two right there, the 1.6, the 2.2.
But you're
Yeah.
still gonna,
and Paul, I understand you correct on reduction of programs and reduction of staff with those programs.
Yes.
Is the only way to go because you can't reduce salaries that are in a salary schedule. I mean, they're contracted.
Correct.
That's already negotiated 30 years out, that salary schedule. I shouldn't say negotiated 30 years out, but you know what I mean, that salary schedule is set.
Benefits and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can approach it there, but the big lion's share is predetermined on what it is.
And that's the difficulty in all school systems. And what happens is when a levy is approved and you get that influx of money that puts your cash balance so high, and then it slowly begins to decline, which is what you see in that 0 point, that the first year, the second year, it really isn't deficit spending. It's that third and fourth year when those expenses catch up. Because again, the revenue stays flat after you get that bump from the increase in taxes. And that's the struggle in most school systems, especially in those that receive far less state foundation funding, like we do, than most. And have to rely on, unfortunately, our residents to generate, the revenue that comes into the school system.
Right, because, we don't use that kind of thinking on the front end. We don't go, look at all this money we have, we should be spending it all. We say, we know that at the other half of this levy cycle, we're gonna be in deficit spending, or whatever they call it,
Yep.
spending more than we're bringing in. So we, and we live with the accusations that you guys are sitting on all this money, because we know that it's a cycle. We're gonna get more than we need at the beginning, and we're gonna get less than we need at the end.
That is correct.
I just have one question. So
Yes.
when I'm looking through this
So when I'm comparing the light blue and the pink, they're both failed then passed,
Yes.
right? So
Mhm.
the only difference I see is in both years you cut 1.6 in 23-24, and then in 24-25, in the pink, you bring those programs back.
Bring everything back, correct.
And then that's why you end up in trouble faster.
Yes.
Well, that's just the only way I can say it.
And what I meant about the infinite number of possibilities, do you bring all 1.6 back? Do you bring 300,000 back? Then do you bring 500,000 next? You can play those games for a long time,
Well, yeah,
but,
because if you bring 800 and 800, which is, I believe, your yellow,
yep, just kind
then
of
that buys you another 2 years.
split the difference, right?
Yeah.
But what you have to keep in mind is, what does the program look like after you've reduced it by $1.6 million?
Yeah.
What is the offering now for the students moving forward? And that's the concern.
Going to Beth's point, like we did a few years ago when we made a bunch of program cuts. I remember the sheet we had where we made, it totaled 860,000 that we made in cuts.
Mhm.
We weren't looking for a levy when we did that, because like Beth
You're
said,
doing this all the time.
we're trying to cut expenses at all times, because it's gonna snowball on you if you
Yeah.
don't. Not just when we're up for a levy do we need to cut expenses, we're always looking to cut expenses. Because that can draw that deadline of a
Absolutely.
levy farther and farther out.
It's to your point earlier of what you've said at others, kicking the can further down the road. If I could, and I don't have it with me today, I can pull it up and show it to you. We have been tracking for the last couple of years, staff in and staff out. And so when people are retiring or resigning and then new staff coming in, we're tracking that data to get an idea of, all the dollars that we're saving versus now with adding the new people who might come in this year. For the current school year, I think this thing goes to line 60-something, and I don't have all the data. We still have 2 people I'm waiting on, 2 new hires that I'm waiting to get their benefit information. And once I do, I can plug that in and show you the attrition of all the people that left and all the people that came in just for this school year. Right now, that savings is over $600,000. And so I think that once I plug in the benefit numbers, if those people take benefits, at the end of the day, we're gonna be plus 500,000 because of the way in which administration is replacing people who leave and finding ways of maybe it's not necessary to replace that person. Maybe through attrition, we can do something different. And that didn't just happen this year. It happened last year. It happened the year before that. And although I wasn't here before that, I saw that it was happening too in the data that I found. So each and every year, to your point, it's not just because Paul left, we're just gonna go replace Paul. We're gonna go find out if we can do it differently, that maybe we don't have to replace a full Paul, maybe we can replace a half a Paul. And so, how do we do that? And that's what's been going on all throughout the personnel process that
We have been
spend a year
doing that
doing.
through attrition, and as you know, we've also looked at our class sizes where we've needed to, and we've made some of those reductions from the secondary level to the elementary. That's another area too, that we would have to look at, would be our class sizes too. And as a board, that's a decision that we made based on what our community wanted,
Right.
with
We wanted
regards
the
to our
smaller
class
elementary,
numbers.
And we heard that loud and clear, and I agree with it, yeah.
Correct.
Especially the elementary, the class sizes have to be under control.
Correct.
Even if someone does retire, goes out, and we hire a new person,
Yeah.
they're still gonna cost us less, because they won't be as high up, potentially may not be as high up on the step level longevity and everything as the person that left. So still would be somewhat of a cost
Most of the time
savings.
that is true. Then you also have certain situations where you may have had a person that's been with the district a number of years. They've retired, they may have family benefits. You may then hire me in who's just out of college. My benefit structure will be different, single potentially. Now you have to keep in mind that first year, you typically have a severance payment
Right.
that negates that savings, but it's the savings that in every year thereafter that we're benefiting from, so yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
We've also covered many positions of people that have had to go out on any sort of leave. We've covered those positions internally. And while those may not always be long-term, we've done that with significant amounts, where at the board office, if we've had an administrative assistant position or whatever, we've covered those and haven't replaced that person for a significant amount of time. So we do look at that always.
So, if there's no other questions, all I would ask that you do is, spend some time looking it over. If you have any questions at all, please give me a call. I was trying not to give you too many to look at, because again, it just gets to be so overwhelming. But if you had an idea of, can you run an analysis based on this? Can you run an analysis based on that? It's a plug-and-play model, so I can easily do that for you. But I think, again, as we begin to narrow down answers to those questions, we can then build something that is more realistic, and and from that, we can then move forward to decide
I
exactly.
gotta tell you, I really like this.
I do too.
This is great data.
Sure.
I love the summary sheet, but then
Yeah.
if
I
I
love
wanna
this.
break something down, I can go and look at the color. It's well organized, it's outstanding. And I have another question
Yes, sir.
for, while we're on the topic of it.
Mhm.
So, you got Auditor of the State with distinction, okay? So I'm like, all right, what's this all about? Okay, with distinction, what's without distinction? So I started looking it up, I went to the auditor's website, and they announce these every week, they put out a post release.
Yes.
And they list what municipalities, schools are all mixed together, there's thousands of them around the state.
Mhm.
And there's one that says, school district, auditor of state award, and then there's auditor of state award with distinction.
Yes.
So I click on the press release with the auditor of state award, and there's 15 listed there. I click on the same week with the one with distinction, and there's 2 or 3. So I start going week to week looking at that, and I'm noticing that that one with distinction, it puts you in a whole other class. And some people might not see that, they just think, oh, probably every school gets this and stuff like that. Can you get some data? Because I couldn't find a list where it lists it all. It's all in these press releases,
Mhm.
but there's no running list that says who in 2021 got it, who got distinction, who just didn't get anything and stuff. And what falls in there, could your staff maybe call the state and find out? Because I'd like to know what percentile that you achieved our school district to. I think that's important information.
Yeah, we can certainly.
Because
call the
otherwise,
state.
it's just a label of an award,
Mhm.
and I'd like to really know what honor it is to get that, because it looks like, looking at the numbers that get it weekly, it's very few.
Yeah. Some of it has to do with the type of reporting that we do, which is our CAFR. So I think that's the Auditor State Award. The distinction piece, if I understand it correctly, has to do with the audit. And so if your audit is clean, without citations and recommendations, then it gets that notation of distinction. Not exactly sure how many there are, but I'm sure we can reach out to the state and just say, give us a ballpark.
Right.
They
Right.
have the data, they should be able to get
Sure,
that to us.
sure.
But yeah, I'll be happy to get that.
But I
for you.
couldn't find it. It's-
It may not just be, I may have
Yeah,
to just reach
all
out,
right,
but
good.
thank you for that, I do appreciate that.
That's great.
And that's actually, that is a testament to everybody in the school system.
Yeah, and your whole staff and
Yep.
everybody.
The staff, administrators, teachers, everybody. So, thank you.
All right, thank you.
That's it?
Very good.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I just have a couple brief things that I wanted to touch base on. First of all, I don't know if the board if everyone is aware, but we do have our intermediate school principal who is out and will be out for the next, I'm saying, probably the next 2 weeks, so this week and next, as of right now. He has some personal health issues, non-COVID related, I can say that. But he is out and under doctor's restrictions that he's not able to perform his duties. So at this time, with the help of my team, I'm covering the building, and certainly Dr. Poe and Mr. McDevitt are helping to pick up some of those duties. So we're kind of doing some dual role, and appreciate the work of the staff. They've been wonderful at also pinch hitting and, keeping the building running tip-top. So we appreciate that, and I'll keep you apprised of anything, if we hear if that's going to be something that's a little bit more long-term, which I'm hoping it's not. We certainly would then update our parents and you as the board as well, and then make some decisions of a plan from there. So don't think I need to do that right now. I think we're okay and can manage that. We did release the quality profile today, so that did go out to our parents. Just wanted to let everyone know that. And And then I did want to go back one more time, and I know we had some discussion regarding this, but I felt that I needed to bring it up again. And it's not that we can't make determinations on each of these different trips. I've kind of lumped this as field trips. So when I call them trips, they're trips in general. We have a lot of what I'm going to call big student events that are coming up where student travel is involved. And I know when we last met, we talked to judge those based on COVID, right? And then also based on cost. But I really think that I want to have still more discussion, if the board desires for that, to really take some of these into consideration. The decisions for these need to be made sooner rather than later because of cost to parents and making sure that the plans are being set up for those. I have reached out to my colleagues as superintendents and some of the other schools, and I can tell you it was kind of crickets. Like, no one really had thoughts about it. It wasn't like, oh yeah, we're going, or we've done this. But we have coming up, of course, our Kenston High School band trip, which is the trip that's over the spring break time. We have the middle school camp, which we did just put a hold on the parent meeting right now, not saying we weren't doing it, but we felt we needed to have some further dialogue. Potentially the out west trip in the summertime, the Washington DC trip that would come up, and all of those types of things. And some of the questions and concerns that have come up in addition to COVID and cost, we're putting students on buses for a long period of time. Of course, they need to wear their mask on the bus. The potential if someone were to get ill on a bus, what happens? We have band students that could be out of state down in Florida, whose expense that they're sick, they have to quarantine. Parents now, how do they get them home? I can't just have a parent put them on an airplane and fly them home. So there's some other logistics to some of that. What would happen if my chaperones were to potentially fall ill and now I have to quarantine them? So I guess I'm just asking the board for a little more maybe discussion, maybe guidance on that, since I'm not getting that directive from other places or from other teams. And I just think that we have to think through some of those. And as you know, just the controversy that we've faced, whether masking, unmasking, anything that we do right now, has all those sides to it. I mean, we heard loud and clear the parents that said, well, it's our choice, and we need to be able to make decisions for our own children. But again, I have to be responsible for entire buses of students and chaperones. And then what happens if potentially kids are down there and now I don't have chaperones to cover? How do I get more people down there to cover? So there's more to it than just, are they going to a place with COVID? Is there a cost involved or whatever? So I don't know how much discussion you want to have, if that's something you would like to think about and provide me with some feedback. But there is a timeliness to those
Right.
discussions.
I'm
So-
good talking about it now a little bit, getting our original thoughts out, and then we can take it with us,
Yep.
stuff like that. I'm a proponent of still doing these trips and just following the local health guidelines of wherever they go. DC trip, yes. 7th grade camp, yes, stuff like that. I think we need to continue and get back doing that normal stuff again. And those are far out, so it is potential that a lot of these guidelines go away by then, by spring. Very, very good chance that we turn that corner and get to that point. And we don't want to be put in a position where we decide not to do something in the spring, and spring comes along and it's like, hey, everything's looking pretty good, that might have been a mistake. I would plan for it, but then you have to have a distinct response plan for all those scenarios you brought up. And that's gonna be a lot of work on your administrators. But I think we owe it to the kids to put that together, that plan, that, yes, what if one of the chaperones gets sick during it? Well, we have a response plan right here for that, ready to go. And we prepare for every scenario that we can do. But my opinion is just make every effort we can to continue doing what we do. Because it is important, those trips, that's some of the things that these kids remember for the rest of their life. I mean,
And-
you go and ask some of these people at the reunions that are coming back, what do you remember? Oh, I remember at seventh grade camp, I remember watching it's a big part of their school.
Sure.
It's a big part of the things
And
they
let
do.
me make a statement, since, we do broadcast this out,
Yeah.
right? I want people to understand that I do appreciate and understand how important those trips are. So
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
fully respect and understand that. I just need to make sure that we can plan for each of those scenarios. You take a camp, and now, it's different when I'm putting a child in their own hotel room or in a hotel
Sure.
room with their family. I'm now bunking them in a camp together,
Sure.
where I can't really, control what's happening in that camp.
Well, I think you take like extra precautions. So I'm thinking back to my school when they did an overnight trip for their seniors and juniors. They required all the kids to take COVID tests, whether they were vaccinated or not vaccinated. We're mask optional in our school, so they required those kids to wear masks 2 weeks before they went. They all had to take a COVID test, and then they went, because they knew when they went, there would be no masks. They were sharing cabins, they were sharing food, they were, they were there. And, yeah, we came back, one person did test positive, happened to be a vaccinated person, test positive. But within 5 days, all the kids were back. No one got COVID from that trip. So we were lucky, but I mean, I think you just have, what Tom said is you have to think of every scenario. Maybe you take a couple extra chaperones so that if somebody goes down and out, you have the coverage there. Have an extra vehicle to bring them back if they're at seventh grade camp, things like that.
I think to piggyback onto what Tom was saying, we do have a responsibility to make sure these kids and parents and, staff and chaperones are all safe. But parents also do have a choice. We have these trips. If someone feels uncomfortable, their child can stay home,
Yeah.
and the parent can elect to tell them to stay home. But I was thinking, just as before you said it, is it possible before we go that everyone within 72 hours leaving has a negative COVID test, not a fast one, but the, what is it, ACH or whatever it's called, that they have the more, the one that takes longer to analyze it, that they all have a negative test within 72 hours. But that protects them, like on the bus, and I guess, I don't say that I'm not so as worried, but, I am, but these kids are already all together at school, like for the band. The band's always together. They go to the football games every Friday together in the bus, It's just that it's a longer bus trip, so I'm not as worried as when they're together, or even at camp, like when the kids go to camp, they're all in classes together. So they're gonna be clustered together. Who I'm worried about at camp is the extra camp counselors that we bring in who aren't our staff, that we make sure they're negative, or that they have some proof of vaccination for the camp counselors, like we get college kids or whoever come in, or high school kids, that we make sure that they're negative or whatever. But the problem is then, like, when you're going to like Florida or DC or somewhere else, is what they can be exposed in those settings. So the camp, I'm not worried, because it's just them, or out west, it's just them. But the
Yeah, and
part
for
where
me,
they're
it's
going-
how I get them home.
How do you get
Yeah.
them home? Or
That's-
what if
that's
they
the
get
challenge,
sick
yeah.
down there
Yeah.
because they're exposed to
Yeah.
all these other,
But I have to believe
People.
that even the out west trip, there was some plan in place if a kid got sick prior to COVID out west, they
did
had to have,
plans.
Yeah.
they had to
did
have a plan.
Kid got the flu that was out there, they had to have some
Yeah.
They had to
contingencies
have
built into
some
their out west
contingency
trip.
plan to
They've
get
done
that
it
The
kid
for
back.
difference
30
here
years.
is they can spread it to people,
Mm.
if it's COVID.
Well,
if it's
well,
COVID
if
related,
they got
yeah.
the flu, they could spread it to
Yeah,
people.
sure.
I mean,
Right.
but there had to be some contingency plan
But the
even
one
back
thing,
then.
even though as we try
They
to
were.
find a
They
way
flew 'em
to
home,
safely
though.
do it, is,
Mm-hmm.
we gotta remember, parents have the option
Yeah.
not to send their kids if they don't
Right.
want to.
Yeah.
And we've had parents do that now, too.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
every kid goes on the Washington DC trip.
Not
Some
every-
of them are
What
discipline
concerns
related, but a
me
lot of them.
is we can control these things that we can control in our environment, or the bus, or them going, but once they get wherever, that's what we can't control.
But I disagree, because we can control that they wear a mask if they're in public. We
Yeah.
control, restaurants, we don't pack them as full when we're making reservations. We have a little control. We have as much control over the students in those scenarios as we have over our own selves when we go out in public. We have things where we can require of them and keep them as safe in public as I feel in public with the protocols that I have.
So you would say that wherever they go, they would wear a mask where they went then?
Well,
Depending on what the
whatever the
situation
local
was.
health
Whatever the
guidelines.
local,
Whatever local, right now, our kids are going to baseball games, they're going to football games, they're doing all this outdoor stuff, they're doing stadium stuff.
Yeah.
They're college football, 108,000 people crammed into a stadium in the student section. So they are doing it. But now we're gonna sponsor a trip that does something not similar to the 108,000 in the stadium, but we're gonna put them in an environment where they're together with people. And as long as they just follow the protocols that we've always followed with that, whatever's the local protocol, it's as good as if when they're not in school. That's my opinion. And
I
that's
just
an
think whatever
opinion.
we decide, or, we talk here and whatever we decide, is that we need to be consistent and stay in the lane, that you can't say, well, this group can and that can't, because then what
Right.
if softball,
Right.
baseball
Right.
come along and say, we wanna go to
Agreed.
Myrtle Beach,
Yeah.
or,
Right.
and then this group says we wanna go to New York City,
Right.
just that, whatever our decision is, that it's consistency, and that we find that, I think it's critical, like you said, is that we have the safety protocols in
Mhm.
place to keep, because it's our duty and responsibility to keep our staff and our students safe.
Okay,
And whatever those protocols might be, whether, I don't know who would help you with those or whatnot, but
well,
Well,
we
and I'm
will,
wondering
we'll
if
work on
the-
those.
For the
Be
ones that
consistent.
travel agencies are involved, like what assistance do they provide? Like, do they have protocols that they expect their participants to follow? Do they have sickness insurance? COVID's different because we're not flying anybody anywhere. But like, do they have a place that they can quarantine their travelers or whatever?
hang a curtain,
Yeah.
put them in the back seat.
So is that the feedback you're looking for?
That
Just
is the
getting a
feedback I'm looking
direction,
for. So
not
if you-
a plan, but a direction.
Right,
of what
and it
direction.
really is a
With
direction.
consistency.
It really is a direction, and it's a consistency, because, I don't want to, again, you don't want to say, well, it's okay for them to go to camp, hypothetical, right? It's okay to go to camp, and then you turn around and say, oh, but,
You can't do that,
Washington
yeah.
DC might be a little different, or
Yeah.
whatever. And parents do have to recognize that they are assuming some responsibility, some risk, as always. I mean, there's, and that's just where we're at. And then I also have to, be sure that I have enough staff that will be able to go, and that I can, protect the staff as much as possible. So I would ask the board to think of some of those. I'll refer back with Mr. McDevitt, and we'll work with, our colleagues and our health commissioners and stuff to kind of walk through some of those scenarios to make sure that we're working through some plans.
Go ahead, Nathan, you were.
And I think it needs to, include like all student activity trips where we're taking kids off the
Mhm.
campus, like even to Playhouse Square or wherever, that we have
Right.
these protocols that they have the fault to go and to do these things.
And we have, and last year we did set up, now we weren't taking kids off of our campus that much, but for every single scenario, as you know, we set up very strict guidelines and protocols. No different than what we're doing currently for homecoming or any events here. And, I agree. You don't want to restrict students, and you don't want to, take things away from them. But we have to do it safely. And so I just didn't want to leave the board with saying, well, evaluate your trips on, COVID and cost and then have another opinion about something. So I appreciate the
I
feedback.
think you have a strong direction, because there's a lot of stuff coming up.
Mhm.
You can't say no to one and yes
Well,
to
you
the
gotta
other.
plan.
We can't
Exactly.
be like a
We're
drunk
already-
driver going down the road. We gotta pick a lane and go with it.
Exactly.
We're already
And
in
so,
October.
And provided, the recommendations may change, COVID may be less, and, so whatever it is, that the protocol and the safety measures are appropriate for the conditions at that time. Does that
Exactly.
make sense?
Yeah.
right,
But
right.
what I'm hearing from this board is we're pretty, at this point in time in this pandemic, we're pretty pro field trip, as long as we sort of do them consistently with the same expectations for safety protocols, et cetera.
And then parents have a choice, eyes wide open, that there's no consequence. If they choose not to have their child partake, it's okay, and there's no consequence for them.
And when we say field trip, just to
And
put
same with sports
put
teams.
a
that are
thing
not
on it.
penalized.
We are not taking our students out of the instructional day for field trips. We have not been doing that. That is based on both COVID, but that's also based on cost right now. And we've been doing that, some of that as a financial consideration for the district as well. So, and we are short drivers, we're short the buses, we're trying to be cost effective with things. So I just want to make sure people understood that. I
Right.
don't want teachers to hear,
They think you're going to the zoo
yeah,
next week
tomorrow
or
we're
something.
going, we're putting all those field trips back in. We have
Well,
not
some of
been
those
doing
field
that.
trips Are at no cost to us, because like the band field trip, that's no cost to us.
No, I think she's
No, I'm
about-
talking about the
The
day-to-day, like
day-to-day
day-to-day,
stuff. Oh, okay.
Mrs. Gaskin. So, those are at a cost with our drivers, and I just can't, I don't have the staffing right now to be able to accommodate all of that. So, thank you for that. Okay?
All right, we do have a couple of reasons to go into executive session, and we shall do that shortly, but I'll open it up to the board. If anybody else has comments, questions, anything that you want to bring forward for discussion?
Nope, I got my list done.
All right, then I need a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing legal matters and negotiations. Can I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Tom, can I have a second?
I'll second.
Beth is seconding. Should we vote on that or not?
Yes. Mhm. Okay.
I want a cheat sheet on how to go. It's right there. I just
I
have to
got
turn
you.
my page.
That's
over.
okay.
Call the roll,
We're
please.
not returning after, right?
Correct. When we come out of executive session, we will immediately adjourn. There will be no board business following executive session. Thank you, Tom. Now you can call the roll.
Mr. Manning,
Yes.
Mrs. Ward,
Yes.
Mrs. Gaskins, and Dr. Kraus.
Yes.
Tom?
All right, we are
I
in
didn't-
executive
You are in.
Someone
session.
must have signed on my behalf, I hope.
Right, and
My signature sheet's over there.